They were the very bedrock of an empire, a military machine that absolutely terrified its enemies for centuries. We're talking about the Janissaries, the elite, unstoppable warriors of the Ottoman Empire. But their story, it's more than just battles. It's this incredible lesson in power, loyalty, and the ultimate danger of refusing to change. And here's the paradox at the heart of it all. How did a force that was literally engineered from the ground up for absolute unquestioning loyalty eventually become so powerful that it held the entire empire hostage? That's the question we're going to dig into. So our story really kicks off with this huge problem for the early Ottoman sultans. See, they're building this massive empire, but they're relying on old-school tribal armies. And sure, those guys could fight, but their loyalties were all over the place, to their family, their tribe, and then maybe the sultan. They needed something new, something that was loyal to them and them alone. And the solution they came up with? It was called the Janissary, which literally just means new soldier, a name we know today as the Janissaries. And honestly, that name was perfect. This wasn't just a new unit, it was a whole new idea of what a soldier could even be. I mean, division was a total 180 from the old way of doing things. You go from these kind of unreliable tribal groups with split loyalties to a professional full-time army, a force defined by one thing above all else, just this unwavering, absolute discipline. But okay, how on earth do you create a soldier like that? Well, the answer was a system called the Devshirme, and it was as brilliant as it was brutal. First, the state would conscript young Christian boys from the lands they conquered. Next, those boys were converted to Islam and totally assimilated, completely cut off from their families, their homes, their entire past. Then came years of just relentless, grueling training in warfare and total obedience. And the result? You get a class of warrior who owes everything, their life, their job, their whole identity, only to the Sultan. And let me tell you, the results were terrifyingly effective. For centuries, the Janissaries were the literal cutting edge of the Ottoman military. They were this unstoppable force that pushed the empire's borders across 3 different continents. So what was their secret sauce? What made them so dominant? Well, that legendary discipline was a huge part of it. They were organized into these regiments called ordas, and they were masters of battlefield tactics. But their real game changer? They were pioneers in using firearms on a massive scale. I mean, while European armies were still kind of figuring it all out, the Janissaries were delivering these devastating, coordinated volleys of musket fire, just mowing down their enemies with shocking efficiency. You know, you could actually make a really strong case that these guys were the world's first modern army. Think about it. A salaried, professional, uniformed standing army, drilled in discipline, and equipped with the absolute latest military tech. They were truly centuries ahead of their time. But like with so many stories of great power, this is where things start to unravel. The very thing that made them so strong, that elite status and singular loyalty, it began to rot from the inside. The protectors of the empire, slowly but surely, started to become its single biggest problem. It all started when that strict Devshirme system began to break down. Janissaries wanted their own sons to get those coveted spots, so hereditary membership became a thing. And that just shattered the whole principle of loyalty to the Sultan. Suddenly, they had families and business deals to protect. They got so powerful they could actually overthrow sultans who tried to get them under control. And here's the fatal flaw. They started to resist any military reform, terrified that new tech would make them obsolete. It is the ultimate tragedy of their story. The very institution that was born from innovation became the biggest enemy of progress. They clung to their old ways, to their privileges, and they actively sabotaged the empire's ability to keep up with its rivals in Europe. Yeah, this couldn't last. The empire was getting weaker, and the Janissaries were like a disease festering at its heart. The stage was set for one final, violent showdown, a day that would go down in history, with some pretty grim irony, as the Auspicious Event. And this was the impossible choice facing the Sultan, Mahmud II. The Janissaries were too powerful to fix and way too dangerous to leave alone. How do you remove a cancer that's wrapped itself around the very spine of your government? Mahmud's plan was, well, it was cold, calculated, and just utterly ruthless. First, he secretly trained a brand new, modern army that was loyal only to him. Then, he poked the bear. He announced reforms he knew the Janissaries would never accept. And just like he predicted, they revolted. They marched on the palace and fell right into his trap. The Sultan's new army was waiting, and with modern cannons, they just surrounded the Janissary barracks and completely annihilated them.
And that was it. A complete and total reckoning. The end of a 500-year-old institution in a storm of cannon fire.
The human cost is just staggering to think about. We're talking over 6,000 Janissaries killed in the battle or executed right after. In one single bloody day, the Sultan erased the biggest threat to his rule and finally cleared the path for modernization. So why are we still talking about this? Why does a story from centuries ago still feel so relevant? Because the rise and fall of the Janissaries is a timeless cautionary tale. It's a lesson about power, about privilege, and about the absolute unavoidable need to adapt. I think you can boil it down to 4 really crucial lessons. First, what starts as a brilliant innovation can harden into a rigid, outdated tradition. Second, that unchecked power and privilege, it almost always leads to corruption. Third, and this is the big one, refusing to adapt to a changing world is a death sentence. And finally, no institution, no matter how powerful or how respected, is too big to fail. And that brings us to a final thought I want to leave you with. When you look at the world today, at giant corporations, political parties, or even big social institutions, which of them have become so powerful and so resistant to change that they're in danger of becoming their own Janissaries? It's definitely a question worth thinking about.